everybody. Welcome again to another CTO Craft Bytes. Today, we're going to have a look at the subject of, does the tech industry suffer from mass imposter syndrome? If this is your first CTO Craft Bytes, let me just tell you a little bit about the group. CTO Craft is a mentoring and coaching community for technology leaders all over the world, focusing on supporting technologists and their leadership growth. Community members are now currently over 7,000, and CTO Craft provides them with one-to-one coaching, mentoring groups, and a curated Slack community with events like this one. Huge thanks today to the headline partners AWS for making these events Bytes possible. So I am Emma Hopkinson-Spark. I'm the Chief of Staff at 101 Ways. I specialize in coaching and transformation, and I'm going to be your host today. I am joined by Jago and Marek. Do you want to just give us a quick introduction to yourselves too?
Yep. Hi, I'm Marek, and I'm an imposter. I'm an imposter because I have founded a company 9 years ago named the Software House. We specialize in web and mobile development outsourcing, and basically I became a CTO there. And the reason I became the CTO there is just I promoted myself to be a CTO because I'm the owner, and that's why I think that I'm somehow imposter, and this is how I felt for a long time. That maybe I just don't belong there because I just made up this position myself until last year on the CTO Craft conference. There was this talk made by Matt Squirrel about the imposter syndrome, and actually I just found out that there is something like imposter syndrome. And I also saw on the chat that lots of people say the same, that they feel the same way. And this is what made me interested in this topic, and that's why I'm here right now talking about it. If you're interested, I will even maybe paste you a link on the chat for this talk. Jago, what about you?
Great.
My name is Jago. I'm a recovered imposter. I've been in leadership positions for the past little over 10 years, in technological leadership positions, I should say. I've been writing articles on leadership and coaching and growing and scaling organizations, building the right culture. I'm very much interested in imposter syndrome, as I am a recovered imposter, but it's also something that I do think is prevalent in our industry. And there are real ways to deal with it. And I hope we can discuss some of those today.
I find it really interesting that you're a recovered imposter. That gives us hope, right? That it is possible to get over it.
Well, but it's a bit like quitting smoking. You can only become an ex-smoker. You will never become a non-smoker again.
Oh, right.
So you will also always have a little bit of that in you, but I contend that that is actually a good thing.
Okay, we'll get to that then, I'm sure. Why don't we start with the basics then? So we're talking about imposter syndrome and how prevalent it is in tech particularly. But what is it then? How do you know if you've got it? What is it? What isn't it? Well, how can we define it for people?
Well, I think there's a couple of symptoms, right, that you can determine for yourself. And far be it from me to present you with some kind of horoscope with all kinds of symptoms that everybody can recognize. But it's I think it's you can only speak of the syndrome when it's really debilitating. So it's important that it actually prohibits you from pursuing opportunities or doing what you feel you need to do. And then if you're looking at some of those symptoms are like something exciting is coming up, what do? Do you procrastinate? Do you over-prepare? When you're successful at something, do you think that was based on your skill or luck? So how able are you to recognize your own contribution to that successful situation? And I think when that gets past a certain threshold, then you can speak of imposter syndrome.
Yeah. For me, I define it in this kind of a special voice in my head. I call it the imposter's voice, telling me that what to actually do to not be uncovered, right? So instead of thinking about how to solve a problem or how to commit into anything, it's more about thinking about how to not get uncovered, which somehow leads you to the solution anyway, but rather in a way that you think that, oh, thanks God, I didn't get uncovered yet, right?
Yeah, you got lucky.
You got lucky one more time, Marek, right? And this is the this is I think the most important part in the syndrome. I also I created this survey, this little pool that some of you probably know because I pasted in the Slack channel in the CTO Craft. Here are the results in the chat if you also want to see. Obviously, my comment is that if you voted I am the real imposter in this poll, you probably have an imposter syndrome.
Find it interesting. It's like you're not really paranoid if they really are out to get you, and that's like
Well, yep.
Just to call people's attention, like I say, you can see a couple of links that have been posted over on the right-hand side in the chat. That little chat window is you can interact, give us feedback, talk to each other in that window. That's fine. The other thing you'll see along the bottom is a little button that says ask a question. So if there is anything you want to ask Jago and Marek, myself, then pop it in there and I will feed in some of those questions into our chat as we go through. So anything on your mind, anything you want to particularly focus on, pop it in there for us as well. Okay, so if that's what it is, and now we know if we have it or not, and I'm sure most people that are joining are probably they're thinking like, I love that example of like, are you going to get found out? I get that. I totally empathize with that over the years. I also would like to think I'm a little bit recovering from it as well. And I don't believe in luck, and it's all, you got there because you deserve it and you're there, but there's always that little voice that's like, yeah, but like you're going to get found out. Someone's going to know that you're blagging it. It's all the time as well. So when you say you recovered then, Jarek, what does that mean? How did you do that? How did it manifest for you then?
For me, it could manifest in interviews, for instance. Like a long time ago when I would be interviewing, I would be in an interview and basically I would just try to get through that interview. And basically you're trying to present yourself in the best possible light, but at the same time, even though you have these accomplishments in the back of your mind, you're like, well, yeah, but am I really, do I really have those accomplishments, or did I really deserve that success?
Or so you're focused on wanting them to believe it, I guess, rather than
wanting myself and them.
Yeah.
I mean, I never lied in an interview. There's no point, right? Because it's about finding a match. It's not about selling yourself. It's about finding a nice opportunity for both you and the employer. But afterwards, I always got this nagging doubt, like, am I really the person for the job? At the same time, when you're doing your job, when you're interacting with people. Necessarily, if you're in a leadership position, but also in all other positions, you necessarily have to speak from your own experience, right? So you have to speak up. And speaking up is very, very hard for you if you have imposter syndrome, because you don't know, like, is what I have to offer really, really valuable, right? Does it actually add something? Now, I don't mean to say that, everything you say is valuable, because it isn't, and that's fine, right? That's the whole point. Not everything you say has to be valuable. Not everything you have to say has to be that meaningful. There's a couple of things I tried. One thing that always crops up in imposter syndrome is fake it till you make it. A very familiar creed, I think, to some. And I tried that as well, and I did that as well. Basically, no, I'm just gonna be the best damn imposter there is, by basically learning everything that I need to learn. And when I get a question about something and I don't know it, say like, okay, I don't know it yet, but I can know it tomorrow. And then learning it, and then doubling down, and basically just working very, very hard to obtain all the knowledge that I felt I needed to have. And that has some value, but maybe we can touch on the downsides of that one as well.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think it's more about the transparency here. That's why I don't personally like fake it till you make it. I also get the same feedback from. I was talking with one of my friends from the marketing, and when I talked about the imposter syndrome, she said exactly that. We call it fake it till you make it. But this is not exactly this thing. I think that this this is what makes other teammates feeling a little bit of imposter themselves, right? If you are faking till you make it, you are actually hurting the rest of the teammates, right? Unless all of them are doing the same thing. But it would be better to just be transparent about it rather than just.
Well, that's the whole point, right?
Yeah.
I mean, it's fake it till you make it. What you do is you say, basically, okay, there is some kind of arbitrary standard outside myself, and I have to conform to that standard. Nobody has given you that standard per se. You're giving it to yourself. So basically, what you do is you stratify some weird idea of what the average norms are, and then you oblige yourself to conform to those norms. But in doing so, you might conform to those hypothetical norms, but
perpetuate it.
But you perpetuate it and you actually reinforce it, right? And the answer then is slightly in a different direction. I agree with you there, Marek. It's more like you have to stretch the definition of what it means to be normal, to conform to those norms.
I think I come from obviously a slightly different perspective. So I was a developer a very long time ago, which I'm going to how long ago. I'm sure I'm much older than I look. But there were times when I was the only woman developer in a team. There were times where I was the only woman in a company, let alone the only woman on a tech team. And as far as like conforming to those norms, and I remember doing the fake it till you make it, but in that sense of, I guess to me it was more like a mantra through it was like, I can do this, I'm totally capable, I'm confident, I'm capable, and that's the image I'm going to portray, and that's it. But is it slightly different as a woman, you think, in technology, or is it, we want to lean into the angle of, is it more prevalent in technology than anything else? So it feels like I have a slightly different angle coming in as a woman developer as well, in a very, very male dominated industry.
Well, yeah, you're completely right. Yeah, it is a male-dominated industry, and it has been for a very, very long time, right? And there's kind of a bit of a macho culture that we have to get rid of. We've been getting rid of over the past decades, of course, but there are still really, really big steps to take. And especially then, if you are like the only woman joining a team, I don't have that experience, obviously, so I'm trying to imagine it, but it's. I can imagine that, there's this group of others, all male, and then as a woman, you're trying to fit in, and you're going to be the best damn male in that group there is, right? To just show like, hey, I might be a woman, but I can compete. I can be in this group. And by doing that, basically, you're again stratifying that hypothetical average norm. And that, it's, first of all, it's very, very hard then for you, I think, as a woman to join a team like that. But then for the next woman, it is not easier. Right? Because in effect, what has happened is that nebulous norm has been confirmed. Like, look, we had a woman join the team. So our norms, she has joined, she's successful, therefore our norms are okay, we don't need to change anything. And that's also what Marek touched on a bit earlier, which I really like. We have to stretch the definition of the norm. We have to stretch the definition. We have to become more diverse. We have to become more inclusive. Like, just imagine, I'm going to try and draw something out in the air, right? Yeah. So you're here, and there's a group of others. They're all dots. And you're here, and basically you're looking at all those dots, and that norm that you are imagining is some kind of average between all those dots. You're looking at that norm from the outside, and you're saying, okay, that's the average. That's what I need to conform to. And you feel like I don't conform to it. Therefore, I am deviant. Therefore, I'm an imposter. But what's so important to realize is that those others, they are also looking at that group of others. They are also looking at an average, and they're also comparing themselves. So you can actually represent it mathematically, if you want, even, and say we're all deviating from that average, right? We're all deviating from it, and the only way to actually feel less of an outsider, feel less of an imposter, is by stretching the norm of deviance. by creating a more inclusive environment for us all. And if we do that, all of us will benefit. Doesn't matter if you're a white male, you will benefit as well. I can guarantee it.
Right.
Because it's just a better environment to be in.
Yeah, I have one example here about those connecting dots. What I had in my company is that I have two groups of imposters, let's say, of people suffering from the imposter syndrome, basically, not the real imposters, but this is what they think. So one is the non-technical managers that somehow joined the very tech specific company, which is the software house, because we are very tech oriented. And there are developers that became managers, right? And those are both groups that think that they are imposters. One is saying that, hey, oh my God, I don't know. I have no clue what those tech guys are talking about. I'm from a completely different world, and so I'm an imposter. And the second one is the developers that actually know the technical stuff, but suddenly became managers, and they say, oh my God, I am the imposter, because now I'm in the world, I have completely no understanding, right? And both of them are like looking from a different directions at the same stuff, but the reality is that they just need themselves to cooperate and create somehow a synergy, right?
Yeah, really. Yeah, you're right.
We have a couple of questions coming in from the audience. First one says, have you ever met anyone who actually didn't have any imposter syndrome at all? What is it you think that made those individuals different? Is it just about confidence, or where does that come from? Do you think anybody doesn't have imposter syndrome?
No, I think everybody has it to some extent. Right? That's the whole point. That's the whole point of all these things, that we all have them to some extent. Some have it stronger than others.
Some don't know they have it.
I've met people, I've met people who don't exhibit any of the signs of it.
I think that's what struck me with that question, is that you might meet somebody who comes over as completely confident, and you would never think that they question themselves or that they doubt themselves at all. Doesn't mean that they don't have it, just means they're very good at presenting that they don't have it, I guess.
I've given that impression in the past.
Yeah.
It's been said, but no, of course, I also have imposter syndrome.
Marek, anything else to add on it?
Yeah, I think you're right, Jago, that this is maybe they just are good at hiding, or maybe they're just confident. Maybe they just they're very confident about themselves.
Isn't it more like, it's confidence is one thing, like, right? But confidence is such a magical word, and it's very easy to say, well, you just need to be more confident, or you need to build confidence. How do you build confidence? Well, hopefully we'll get into that in a bit, maybe. But like, I don't think it is about confidence. I think it's about self-awareness,
right?
And knowing what you can do and knowing what you can't do. I'm a very introverted person, for instance, and I can be in a talk like this, or I can give a talk on the stage. I know I can. I've done that in the past. What you don't see is that after that talk, I need a couple of hours to recuperate, right? I need to recover from it. If I have a day full of meetings, in my evening, I kind of don't want to socialize, right? I kind of just want to play a game or, watch a movie or something like that. So people will give an impression, but that doesn't mean that is the way it is. They're just another, and you are looking at another from the outside.
Yeah, that's true. It's same here that I actually I also have to recuperate after that. Yeah, maybe it doesn't seem you guys on the audience, because we are smiling, and talking very freely, but actually it's kind of stressful, and we also think like, what are we doing here? Are we even like in the right position right now to talk about it?
No, I'm the introvert too. People don't believe it. And I was a professional musician before I was a developer, and I've played in front of thousands of people. But I get my energy from within rather than from without. And after this is done, I will switch everything off and be quiet with the dog for half an hour and decompress, is what we call it. You need.
Same. Yeah.
Yep. A couple more questions coming in. So when does imposter syndrome become truly negative influence? We seem to be saying that everyone has this lack of confidence to some degree, maybe, but is there a point at which it gets in the way of like the nuts and the bolts of the work, and what actions can you start to take then at that point? So I think that's what you said, doesn't it? It's okay feeling like an imposter at some point, but at what point does it become debilitating, and at what point does it do you harm? So yeah, what do we see? How does that manifest, and what can you do about it?
Oh,
that's a big one. Marek, you go first.
Okay, so I think the most negative thing is what I call dodging bullets, right? So when you're more focused on dodging bullets than solving the thing, this is a negative form of imposter syndrome, right? And I see a couple of people that really what they would really like to say is, I don't know, right? They would really like to just start this conversation, but I don't know, but let's just figure it out. And then it starts to be a completely different conversation when we admit that we just don't know, right? And instead of that, if you have like a very, very huge imposter syndrome, you just don't admit that, but instead you're trying to dodge bullets or think about other topics, or say that it depends on something that you cannot do. And this is, I think, the most negative form.
Yeah, that's I couldn't put it better myself. I do have something to add, though, if you don't mind. I think imposter syndrome is very closely related to a feeling of alienation, right? Basically, we derive meaning. I don't know where people find their meaning in general, but I do know this: as social beings, as social entities, we derive meaning from having connections to other people, right? So when we are experiencing imposter syndrome, there's a disruption in that, right? We cannot derive meaning from what we do. We're dodging instead of actually having meaningful interactions. And that is a real shame. So for me, it is really about, is it prohibiting you from getting meaning from those social interactions, from combating alienation? And then very closely related to that, if you allow me to take a step into history, somewhere in the late 19th century, there was a famous sociologist, Durkheim, who basically introduced the term anomie, which is a very, very, very nice term, and I advise everyone to look it up and to read more on this, which he said was a mismatch of the norms of the individual or the small group and the norms of the collective, right? And that feeling itself, it leads to a feeling of alienation. And that is something that is, I think, the most destructive thing that we can experience as human beings. Something that stops us from creating meaning in our daily life. So, yeah, what can you do? I think Marek's advice is solid. You have to acknowledge. You need to reach out. You need to build your meaningful interactions. You need to derive meaning from those meaningful interactions. It doesn't matter how introverted you are. So any and all strategies to cope with it should revolve around that as well. Talking to people, reaching out, making sure that they know who you are, and you know who they are, because that turns like the other, like that you're watching from the outside. It kind of takes some of the magic and some of the fear out of that, right? Because the other is not something to be afraid of, right? The other is something to embrace, to learn more about, and that in itself will stretch the definition of the norm of deviance, and that will allow you, I think, to maybe not overcome, but be more aware of and deal with it in a more effective way with your imposter syndrome.
It's interesting. I feel it's I can feel two hats, right? I have that in the struggle right now. And on one hat, it's like I can conceptualize why it's the right thing to do, and to be braver and to be bolder about that, and to demonstrate vulnerability, and to say I don't know, and to admit mistakes, and to to blaze that trail for other women in technology that come behind you and all of those things. I can get that. But then I can also picture myself. And I remember there have been times where I've been sat in meetings or sat in organizations and clients and have seen somebody take that role and just sit there and say, oh, I don't know, I've never had to do that, or I'm not really following, and what does that mean? And I've literally sat there thinking like, wow, how do they do that? Like, how can you just do that? Like, and such admiration for somebody that's brave enough to expose themselves like that. So it's terrifying, actually, if you're already in that zone. That's a really scary place to go and put yourself. There must be lots of people that are not the only one that's feeling that fear of like, I'm not sure I could do that. But is that where then you think that self-awareness comes down to, and actually just acknowledging and leaning into that a little bit and saying, well, why is that so scary? And maybe next time it won't be, I guess.
Yeah, and you don't have to do it in that group, right? You can just pick one person in that group and talk to that person and say, wow, I was really impressed with that. I also didn't follow, but I didn't feel comfortable asking.
Right.
Like in a one-on-one situation, you're already building a connection to someone. Right? And you're teaching yourself, you're building a skill, namely, because it is a skill, right? Acknowledging that we don't know everything, understanding that we don't know everything. Right? And if you do that enough, I really strongly believe that imposter syndrome can become your superpower.
Interesting. Marek, anything else to add on that?
Yeah, I think that this showing to the group that this is nothing bad to admit to any kind of mistakes, or that we just don't know anything about something. That's a very crucial part for me, at least as a manager. Also, the commenting maybe on the things that you have said, Jago, some time ago about if people are afraid that the thing that they are gonna say will not bring any value, right? Well, usually it brings, but in a different way, because sometimes it doesn't. Okay, it's maybe not the best idea, but I've seen tons of examples where actually on this maybe poor ideas, we actually build something that is greater, right? And I use it a couple of times, that I just say, maybe this is stupid, but maybe it will inspire you, right? And they say what they're going to say. And actually, if they know that this might be some inspiration, they say, maybe not in this way, but, right? And they start like the discussion that would never have happened if I haven't said this seemingly stupid thing at the beginning, right?
Yeah, I like that one a lot. Another one very much like that is, hey, do you mind if I try to put that in my own words? And then try to explain what you just heard in your own words. And then, you're just trying to explain it, right? So it takes some of the, it takes the edges off, right? Because you're just trying to explain it. You're just trying to understand it, and people can add to that, and then you can add to that. It's like having the start of that conversation is very scary, right? And getting over that big hurdle, that's the hardest part. But there are ways to do it.
But the way you both just framed that lead in into your next statement or into your next question is effectively asking permission to do that. It's like it's the preamble. It's like, okay, I'm going to ask a really dumb question now, but, and this may have been said before, but, and it's that kind of, you're giving yourself permission to go and say something that people can either receive or not. And it's just
and that's the real trick, right? Because you're asking the other, but you're really asking yourself, and you're really giving yourself permission to. And that's the trick. Then you're kind of tricking yourself, but for me, it works.
So why do we then? Because so what we're talking about is how much more prevalent do we think this is in the tech industry? What is it about technologists or tech industry do we think that we see more of imposter syndrome, or do we? Is it just a perception?
I have opinions.
Yeah. So maybe I will first start, because I thought that maybe it's IT, is more IT related stuff. But partially of what I say, that there are like non-technical managers and technical managers, and maybe this is different in different branches. I also I also wrote this article on LinkedIn that we are quite a fresh industry. I think I see that George Hopkins just followed on that also in these questions and answers here, that bankers, doctors, competence lawyers, they draw hundreds of years of experience that we just lack of as the whole industry. And this and basically the real answer is that the whole industry is like a toddler. So we all don't know how to do stuff, right? But nobody admits that, because that would be like unprofessional. So we just try our best, and maybe this is why this is so common here. But Jago has a different opinion. Did a little bit of research, as far as you know.
I did. Yeah, I reached out to acquaintances in the creative industries, and I basically asked about imposter syndrome. Tell me what you're experiencing. You name it. Now, the group that responded wasn't very big, but it was actually quite telling that yes, there's a very definite presence of imposter syndrome all across the world. And well, Emma, it's no surprise to you. You performed for thousands of people, and I'm willing to bet you were experiencing imposter syndrome.
Not on the surface. No one could tell.
Not at the surface. No. But the thing I think which is different about the tech industry is that we have this illusion of rationality, right? So we look at technical jobs, and you look at a vacancy for a technical job. It's basically bullet hell, right? So you see like a very long string of bullet points. I hate bullet points in vacancies. It doesn't work. You need to tell a story. People need to read that story. They need to be able to identify with that story. But that's not how most vacancies are. Most vacancies are 3 years of this, 7 years of this tech stack, these skills. This is what you need to bring to the table. Now, you're already at a disadvantage, right? Because nobody conforms to all of those. Nobody applying to any job anywhere conforms to all the bullet points unless it's a very short list of bullet points. So you're already at a disadvantage from before day one, I think. And I think that is a bit different for the tech industry. I think that is a bit more prevalent in the tech industry, with all these frameworks, with all these bits of knowledge that you have to have, with all these skills that you have to have. Apart from that, we tend to be kind of a cerebral industry, which means, yeah, we're in our heads, right? And if you're a person who's in their head all the time, then you're going to be thinking about yourself. You're going to be thinking about your own performance. You are going to measure yourself. You are going to try to apply some metrics to yourself. You're going to do it. And that means that, yeah, you will invariably conclude that you don't conform to that hypothetical average. And apart from that, there's another thing, which is go on LinkedIn. Look at all these people. Well, look at me. I write my articles. I put my articles online. People like them, sure. People respond to it, great. But reading those articles, do you think, oh, that's a guy, he must be suffering from imposter syndrome? No, you don't, right? You think this guy, okay, he has something to say. And he's basically sharing all these positive experiences and all these positive things and all these wonderful stories. It's the same if you go on Facebook. If you look at influencers, if you look at 20-year-olds who are very, very thin and touting the advantages of having a fitness life, right? It's all these things, they conspire to reinforce your imposter syndrome. Conspire is not the right word because that implies intent. There is no actual intent, of course, but we are exposed to these things, and we invariably compare ourselves to these things. And yeah, that is in the tech industry, I think, even stronger. We go to all these tech talks as well. We see people on platforms. We join panel discussions. We see very nice groups. We see our fellow engineers. They're not afraid to speak up, but we don't see the ones who are afraid to speak up. We don't see those because they don't speak up, right? So it's kind of it's a vicious cycle in that sense for the tech industry, and breaking through that. Again, I would say the only way to do it is by allowing for more deviance, allowing for a widened norm, being more inclusive. It is a proven fact that a more inclusive environment lessens feelings of anxiety of all those people in that environment.
I guess the other thing that strikes me particularly about the tech industry is you are it's still a bit of a dark art, isn't it? The rest of your organization will look at you as the experts, and you're supposed to know this stuff, and so there's not just the pressure you're putting on yourself, but I guess there's that perceived pressure as well of that it's got to be right, and people don't understand what you do, and it's still it is a creative industry, but people think of it more, is it maths or is it art? It's kind of both, right? And maybe it's the lack of appreciation for that, or for understanding, and the opaque nature of what it is that we do that can add to that as well, of like can't show a chink in the armor, maybe.
Yeah, very well put. Completely agree.
Yeah, I always say that I know people that still think that developers are kind of wizards, kind of mages doing some magical stuff that they just don't know what the developers are doing, and this is what you said, right, about this dark arts, and I think that it might change a little bit in the future, because now there is at least in Poland, but probably in your countries as well, even in primary schools, or even in some kindergartens, I believe that there is already some coding exercises or something like that. When I was young, well, it was completely out of reach, right? But I see that this new generation, actually, even if they will not be the developers, because they actually don't need to be, they will at least understand a little bit what it is about, and this will put this curtain out of the screen, right?
My daughter was doing Python at 7. It's like,
yeah. Oh.
I like that a lot, but I don't completely agree.
No.
I think if you stratify too early, right? So if you're basically teaching these skills, I mean, that's valuable. Of course, that's valuable, and it's wonderful because you're opening up worlds for people, which is great. But if you're doing it in an educational setting, you're also setting some standards, right? And that feeling of anomie, which I referred to earlier, that doesn't just come from a very individualized situation where everybody's, an individual and they have to sort of figure it out individually, you name it. You can also experience that, or are actually quite likely to experience that, if you are confronted with a very rigid system of norms, right? Where you will definitely not conform. So it can actually also, if not done right, exposing people to this knowledge and expecting people to also pursue this knowledge in school and get grades for it, you name it, it can actually reinforce that feeling of anomie, and therefore, I think, imposter syndrome.
Yeah.
You have to be careful, I think.
It's just the one other thought that strikes me as far as it being more prevalent in tech is I do wonder if we were running this conversation with a bunch of people from finance or marketing, would they be saying the same things, as in like, oh, it's much more prevalent in finance than anywhere else, or is there a little bit of that it's just where you are, and maybe everybody feels it and you just don't see it.
One of my former employers was KPMG, one of the big 4 accounting firms. Wonderful employer, by the way, wonderful people. And there, people also experienced it. Yeah.
And we have an interesting question, which might just pause for thought as well. It's also had votes as well in the list. It says, how do you distinguish a serious cultural misfit and the natural imposter syndrome in a new hire? So I guess it's like the idea, the concept, Jago, that you're talking about, but you're not, it's that norm that you're conforming to, or are you not? How do you know that whether it's just actually you're not going to and you're in the wrong place? I guess from the perspective of the person that's joined and from the company, I guess, from what they're seeing. So yeah, how do you tell the difference?
Well, that's always the question with deviance, right? What is acceptable deviance and what is not, right? Because setting fire to the bathroom is also deviance. Is that a norm that we want to, is that something that we want to normalize? No, that's not something we want to normalize. So as a group, you still have to have some rules, some guidelines. And invariably, that will lead to some people feeling a bit more of an imposter, but you have to do it. You have to do it. I don't want to go into a very topical discussion about it, but basically there is such a thing as the needs of the group. A group also needs people to join in on the group, but fortunately, social groups also have all kinds of little hooks and angles you can use to hook into a group. But you have to do that through meaningful interaction. Now, don't want to go too far into it, but for instance, if you're an engineer or if you're in an engineering group, you probably are working with coding guidelines. Now, if you have new people on board, it's very interesting to let them talk about those coding guidelines and to include them in discussions about coding guidelines, right? Because what you're doing there is setting some very clear norms as a group. And if you're, as an outsider, coming in and you get to be part of that conversation immediately, that helps you cross a bit of a boundary. So while you're doing that, you are at once building up some acceptable norms, but you're also including someone in establishing them. Or what some organizations do, including us at TicketSwap, is guide people in their onboarding period and make sure that on the first day, when they have their laptop and they have their environment set up, that on their first day they can push a commit, right? Something that's merged into the code base. Basically, immediately pulls them in and helps people get over that hurdle. So, not a direct answer. There is such a thing as real deviance, of course, which can be harmful, but that's mostly the reactionary deviance, like people who want to limit accessibility, who want to limit inclusion.
Right.
That's a whole other conversation.
Marek, anything else?
Yeah, I think that I personally like people that are a little bit out of our bubble. I would call it this way, right? Because they bring some fresh blood to the team, and we have a couple of people that were, for example, there was one guy who was a historian before and now is a QA, for example, right? Or a couple of or some guy connected with the chemistry, and they really brought some new perspectives to the things, right? So this is actually good to have somebody that is maybe out of your culture, but the most important thing is the willingness to join or the willingness to participate in this in this whole fun and being transparent about it. And this is what I think is this distinguishing. The most important thing is to really see if this person like wants to join us, is happy about being here, or rather not, right? Because if not, it's not gonna fly.
The whole cultural fit thing is interesting, isn't it? Because if you're not careful, you end up hiring a bunch of people that are exactly like you.
Exactly.
So you don't. There's cultural. What do you really mean by cultural fit? If your goal is to repeat exactly what you've got, then that doesn't sound very sustainable or healthy. You, like you say, you want diversity, you want inclusivity. I always think of it being more like you should know what culture you're aiming for and be purposeful about how you curate that. But that's not just hire people that fit in, because that's how you end up with a bunch of people that are exactly the same as you.
Funnily enough, Marek and I had this conversation, or a conversation like it, a year ago, I think, where, it was also clear that, we say culture fit, but it really is more about culture add. And it's really, indeed, a curated culture is very important. To touch back on the previous question, though, if I may add, I think what you're really asking is what is tolerance? And then I will refer you to Popper. Read Popper, The Paradox of Tolerance, because that will give you all the answers that you want in that regard. But to summarize it a little bit, the only thing we cannot be tolerant of is intolerance. That is the only thing. And all the rest we have to be, to some extent, tolerant of. in order to maximize freedom for the group, for the collective.
Interesting.
Yeah, but it's the paradox of tolerance, because yes, there is still something that you cannot be tolerant of, and that is that which promotes intolerance. It's written as a response to the Second World War, so I heartily recommend reading up on Popper.
We should get these links together and start to share some things.
Already Googling this. I should definitely.
You find the link.
You can just read my articles.
We've got about 10 minutes or so left. Anybody that has any more questions, do pop them into the ask a question bit down the bottom. One quick one here that's come up: remote working versus in the office. How do you think that has impacted? It says, how does it affect CTO confidence levels? But I guess how does it impact people's anxieties and imposter syndrome all over the place, I guess?
Yep. So remote work that happened to all of us last year, because you know what happened, didn't help in this situation. I maybe just give one remark here, how it looks like from the perspective of onboarding people that we've just struggled right now, is that basically people are changing their job, but they are not changing their physical place. So they are sitting in front of their computers, right, in their own home. Now they switch the job, for example, to TSH, right? And so they're in the new company, but actually they are sitting in the same spot with the same stuff around them. And this is what makes them mentally, it's mentally very difficult to now switch the jobs when actually you feel that you're in the same place. And this also causes probably a lot of imposter thoughts, right? That I'm like in the what's happening here, right? And it doesn't. It does. So for our existing employees, it wasn't such a great. It wasn't such a great influence by switching to remote work. We did that before, and they kind of still got it, right? But for those new guys, those newcomers that come last year, I see that they it's a big challenge for them to really be onboarded on a new company right now, and I believe they might think about themselves a little bit as an imposter, right, more than usual.
I think you're totally right. I think there's like what you touched on is if you're remote, all communication has to be explicit, right? Because if you're in a video conference, you can't just read body language that easily. And if you want your point heard, or if you want to make your displeasure known or whatever, you have to speak up, right? And for somebody who already has imposter syndrome, that can be very, very hard. It can also be the final push to get somebody over that hurdle. It can actually be beneficial. I think it becomes interesting when you have to go back to the office after lockdowns, because suddenly you need to go into that office again. And if you're suffering from imposter syndrome, I can imagine that's going to be very exciting for you.
Yeah.
Right. So I think we're seeing that as well. That quite a number of people are experiencing some hurdles, are experiencing some barriers in going back to the office. And I think as an organization, you need to be fine with that. And also you need to engage those people in the conversation, like, okay, what can we do to make it easier? What can we do to help you get over the barrier? Apart from all the safety concerns, right? I mean, those are always valid and not a discussion, right? But you can still coach people.
Yeah, just one hint on the body language when you said, which we sometimes do something like this, and actually it helps a lot if you change the position, because usually you see just the talking heads, right? And you probably completely read me in a different way when I just did something like that, right? And it helps sometimes to encourage people to just stand up, show themselves, the whole body, and it also relaxes the atmosphere on the call, the remote.
Well, I like that because imposter syndrome is something you experience when you're encountering a shared space, right? And when you're working from home and you're watching these talking heads, yes, then are you really sharing a space? How do you turn it into a shared space? Anything that can help you with that. And I think this posture, yes, can definitely help with that. There are other things, of course, but that's mostly to do with building those interpersonal connections. Something I really like is when mediators are coaching juniors and seniors are coaching mediators, because then you have a lot of individual connections built up already. And that can also help people get over the boundary for pair programming, for instance. And when somebody's over that boundary and they can actually engage in pair programming, you also start building that trust more. But if somebody's suffering from imposter syndrome from the get-go and you're telling them, now go pair program, that's not going to work.
Yeah.
It's
too exposing, isn't it, for some people, just straight from the start?
Yeah. It's way too scary. It's cruel.
We only have about 5 minutes left. There is one question that I think is as interesting and from a different angle as well. So as leaders in your organization, how can you spot it? How can you recognize it? And so you've spoken a lot about the individual and how they're feeling and what they can do about it and actions that they should be taking. But as a CTO, as a leader in an organization, and you recognize it in your people, what can you, how do you spot it? What can you do about it?
Yeah, you can do a lot. You can do a lot, I think. The list of what you can do is too long to discuss in 5 minutes. But I think some things you can use to spot it are do you notice that some people are procrastinating when difficult things are coming up? Or are people over preparing when difficult things are coming up, like I mentioned earlier? Are people actually building connections? Are people speaking up? Do people feel at home? But it's mostly, you need to take the time for it. It's not something, there's no like small checklist like, okay, this is it. Top 3. I just saw top 3. Well, I think the preparation part is very important, right? I think seeing how people interact in a group and talking to people about how everybody's interacting in the group, that's very important. And I think it's also important to just have one-on-one conversations with people and see how they respond to, for instance, a compliment. Because how people respond to a compliment is very, very telling, right? Some people will accept the compliment and some people will be visibly uncomfortable with it or try to deflect it. And I think those 3 things, they can really help you in figuring out, okay, who can stand to get a bit more support.
Interesting.
Yeah, I totally agree with this. How people react to the compliment, I like it a lot, because you're right. This does a lot. I'll add that ancient Egyptians believed that naming things will give you control over it.
Ah, yes, I love that one.
And basically, if you name something, like we just did, right? It's a completely different story. When actually there is some name on it, you can already talk about it. You can already publicly speak about it. And this is something I encourage maybe leaders to do, is to just name it and see what happens.
And showing your vulnerability.
Yep.
Sharing situations.
It's one of the things that strikes me, I guess, there's one thing in recognizing it in the people that you work for, but if that work for you and in your teams, but if you work on the assumption that everybody's probably suffering from a little bit of this anyway, then that kind of gives you that starting point, doesn't it? And you modeling those behaviors of showing vulnerability, admitting mistakes, and making it okay to not know everything in the room, then that even if you're not working with an individual one-to-one to help them overcome some of that stuff, there's a lot that you can do on the assumption that the people in the team probably have got it, you just haven't seen it yet.
Exactly. And by doing that, you can also allow people to start the conversation themselves a bit more, hopefully.
Yeah.
But I think that's the most important one.
I have to say, I'm feeling very seen in this last hour. It's very strange. That comment around how people respond to compliments. If there's anyone in the audience who knows me, well, I famously hate compliments, and I hate having those conversations, and I can't stand it when someone says something nice to me. So yes, I'm feeling very seen, and I'm probably blushing when you were saying like people that don't accept compliments, but we should probably wrap up the conversation before it gets really embarrassing.
Can I say one more thing?
Depends.
Something that is done in a lot of organizations, and it's done for all the best reasons, but something to really consider or reconsider is handing out rewards for people for outstanding behavior.
Right. That
can be very, very damaging, and it's really something to watch out for and to be careful.
Yeah.
This is one of the things we haven't touched on, is that kind of hero culture and macho culture, and
And it's something that can be very valuable to an organization at some point, but that's also at some point you need to step beyond it. I'm very happy that at TicketSwap we're doing just that, and we're really taking some real good steps in it. So hats off to our HR department. They're doing an awesome job. But if that is happening in your organization, don't be afraid to discuss it, because I can imagine that doesn't help.
Yeah, I'm happy that hero creators for comic books, they always put for each hero some vulnerability. That's a good thing to build on.
Good. We are just about at time. I'm posting into the chat window now, at the very least, the LinkedIn profiles for Marek, Jago, and myself. I think Jago, you're not on the CTO Craft Slack channel yet, but you will
Not
be.
yet.
Is that right?
I will be, and also if you go to my LinkedIn, you want to read my articles, they're on there.
Excellent. So yeah, feel free to connect with everybody afterwards and carry on the conversation. I think there's probably a lot more that we could carry on talking about, actually. Thank you very much for joining us. And yes, connect to us afterwards. I'm not sure when the next event is, but CTO Craft do run these at least every couple of weeks, if not weekly. So keep an eye out for the next one. Any closing thoughts just before I wrap up, Marek, Jago? Anything you want to leave people with?
Well, thank you for hosting an excellent session, and Marek, as always, a true pleasure to speak with you and get your insights as well.
It was a pleasure for me as well. Thank you, Jago. Thank you, Emma.
Excellent. Thanks very much, everybody. Speak to you again soon. Bye-bye.